I was up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
Diddy breaks his silence after a disturbing video surfaced of him purportedly beating his ex-girlfriend back in 2016. Will his apology help him or hurt him? And how does this affect him legally? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, everybody, this is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Well, Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is actually helping users file for compensation due to Google users' privacy issues through their Incognito browser. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. We have another emergency Sidebar podcast for you right now, and that is because over the weekend, Sean Diddy Combs has broken his silence. And what do I mean by that? Well, it wasn't in reaction to all the lawsuits that we've talked about here on Sidebar. It wasn't in reaction to the raids on his properties in LA and Miami. Yes, we've heard things from him and his representatives. They've put things out there, statements before. But this is the first video of the 54-year-old rapper and producer where he's actually responding to something. And what he is responding to and what he was addressing was this incredibly disturbing video that surfaced of him beating his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura, back in 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel in LA. That's what it purportedly shows. Now, we already discussed the video on a previous Sidebar, but the video appears to show Diddy in a towel chasing down Ventura, who was at an elevator bank in the hotel. He proceeds to grab her, throw her down, kick her twice, drag her by the shirt. It follows up with him cornering her out of frame from the surveillance footage at this elevator bank, and then throwing what appears to be a vase in her direction. It is horrifying. It is absolutely horrifying to see. There's no other way to explain it. It is awful, and it is burned in a lot of people's minds. And I'll tell you what, it was Cassandra Ventura who had to endure that. And from a legal point of view, it matches up almost verbatim with her allegations, the description that she laid out in her lawsuit against Diddy. She filed this lawsuit against him back in November of 2023, accusing him of sex trafficking, abuse. She settled with Diddy the day after. So this video not only gives strength and credence to her allegations, but in a way, and as we discussed, it also gives strength to the other allegations and the other sexual misconduct lawsuits that he faces. And there are several. And to be very clear, doesn't necessarily prove that all of the allegations are real, that they all happened, but it definitely makes everything different. It puts everything in different context. And of course, we know this comes on the heels of his homes being raided by federal agents, although at this point, no charges have been filed against him or his family or his associates. But today, Sunday, May 19th, 2024, 2 days after CNN published that video of Diddy in 2016, reportedly beating Ventura, he posts this video on Instagram.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. But sometimes you got to do that. I was up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy, and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
Wow. Let me bring in right now Nadia Shihata. She is a special guest that we've had here on Sidebar before when we've been talking about Diddy. Why? Well, other than the fact that she's a great criminal defense attorney, she was one of the New York prosecutors in the R. Kelly case, helped put him away. So, Nadia, it is great to see you. I really just want to start off your reaction to Diddy's apology video.
I mean, I can understand why he did it for a public relations point of view. He needed to address this incredibly damning video, incredibly disturbing video that came out. I don't know, as if I were his criminal defense attorney, if I would have advised him to make a statement here, because the allegations about that video in the complaint of Cassie Ventura are put in a specific context. And in the complaint, the beating is alleged to have happened on the same occasion as one of the what they call FOs or freak-ons or freak-outs.
I think freak off or something like that. Yeah,
freak off, which is essentially the sex trafficking allegations. And so now we have him admitting that that's him on the video, admitting what he essentially can't deny because it's on there. And this is powerful evidence that I'm sure federal prosecutors are looking closely at.
Do you think that this could be used in a federal case against him? And we don't know exactly what they're looking for, but purportedly they say they're looking at, sex trafficking allegations. Would this be a form of sex trafficking? Could this be a piece of evidence that is used against it? Because I agree with you. Essentially, it is an admission of guilt.
Yeah, so sex trafficking at the federal level is essentially using force, fraud, or coercion, or a combination of those means to induce someone to commit a commercial sex act or to engage in commercial sex. And if the allegation is that he is using force or coercion, which could be any threats of force or serious harm, which a physical beating would qualify as to get someone to engage in that activity, then certainly this could be evidence of that, particularly since the allegations in the complaint allege that this beating occurred in the context of one of those commercial sex act activities.
Did you find it interesting that he waited a full day before responding? It wasn't as if the video came out and then 2 hours later he put this out. It makes me wonder, he was thinking about the timing of it. He couldn't wait too long. Do you think he was advised by legal counsel here to respond in some way? And I mean, again, you said there's kind of a pitfall for him to do that, and we don't know if he was advised and kind of went off book and just said whatever he said. But do you think that the timing of it, if he responds 2 days later or a day later, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I'm sure he was advised, not just by legal professionals, but also, I imagine, by PR professionals. And so when you're a public figure like him, you have to weigh kind of the legal consequences, but I'm sure he's also thinking about the consequences to his reputation and image and needing to get out kind of in front of this and apologize. So perhaps he thought it was worth that risk in that sense.
What do you make of the fact that he says he's taking responsibility, and I will get to that in a minute because I think it's interesting. But the fact that he seems to put, I don't know if necessarily the blame, but trying an explanation or context seemingly on substance abuse, which I will tell you has been the allegations put forward in a number of the lawsuits, that he has a drug issue or had a drug issue. And there was these allegations that he was abusing drugs. But the idea that kind of saying, he said he was expletive off. He was, he was kind of not in the right state of mind. What did you make of that?
Look, that may well be the case, but that's not a defense to this type of crime. I mean, you can't, even if your excuse is you were on drugs and acting erratically, that's not going to be a legal defense to using coercion or force to get someone to engage in sex trafficking. So certainly it's an explanation, a PR explanation, and maybe it would have some appeal to a jury even, but it's not going to be a legal defense to these types of charges. But it certainly may have played a factor. I will say, looking at the video, one thing that certainly stands out is it doesn't appear to be something that this is like the first time it ever happened, right? This is how he's acting when he presumably knows he's on video, that there's surveillance cameras in a hotel by the elevators and in the hallways, and this is how he's acting. So I'm the prosecutor, I think this really substantiates what they're probably hearing from Miss Ventura and perhaps other potential victim witnesses. And that's powerful evidence. There's honestly, I can't think of more powerful evidence than video evidence of this type coming to light.
It's so interesting you say that because it was brazen. It's in an open hotel room, possibly at 11 in the morning, if I remember that timestamp. So you could say maybe he was so messed up he didn't even realize what he was doing, or it's as you believe, if you believe the allegations put forward in these complaints, that he felt he was untouchable. He felt he was so powerful that he would just do whatever he wanted to do and no consequences. This is where I find it really interesting. If that video, which my mind, it's very clear. The quality of it's very clear. But if the video were grainy and you couldn't tell exactly what was happening, I don't think we would have heard a response from Diddy. There's a chance we could have heard a denial of it once again, because why do I say that? When the allegations came out, he was denying it. He when the Ventura lawsuit came out and the other lawsuits came out, he posted, let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. And I want to pull this up too, because this was a few days before the video came out. He posted on Instagram, "Time tells truth." Don't know what that was in relation to, but would you agree with me if the video wasn't so clear, we probably wouldn't have seen this apology response?
I think that very well could be the case. I mean, it also, the hubris here is also in the fact that you make a statement like that after allegations like this come out, denying everything completely. And there's some reporting that he knew that this video was out there and existed and may have paid for it to be covered up in some way. And so knowing that this evidence is out there and still making a statement like that also seems to detract from the kind of belated apology now that the evidence has been broadcast on national television.
Don't you find it interesting too? Remember, he cannot be criminally charged in California for assault, whether it was simple assault or felonious assault, because there was a 1-year statute of limitations for simple, 3 years for felonious. He says he takes accountability. He seemed to suggest that he takes responsibility. He's been sorry about that from the very beginning, but he wasn't sorry enough to go to authorities within that 3-year limit. And it's alleged, like you said, in her complaint, that he purchased that footage for $50,000 from the Intercontinental Hotel.
Yeah, and look, the allegations about the purchase of that video, other than just being interesting for his kind of state of mind, are also kind of very interesting for a prosecutor or law enforcement, because we discussed before how they might be looking at racketeering charges in this case. And if people are going out and buying this video or trying to cover this up, obstruct justice in that way, my guess is, and I'm sure prosecutors are looking into it, is that this was not something Diddy did on his own. So he probably had other people helping him with that. And that gets us back to evidence of an enterprise and its means and methods, including what is done by others to help him cover up these acts.
Why do you think, and we don't know where how the video was released, but do you find it interesting that this video has finally come to light in 2024 after both of his homes have been raided? 2 digital content was obtained by law enforcement. He's facing multiple lawsuits. What should we be making about why this video is coming out now?
Look, the timing is obviously interesting. I don't think I would bet money that it was not prosecutors who released this video. Sometimes there are leaks from law enforcement, but I have no idea in this case. But odds are that there are other people with this video, including potentially people who worked at the hotel at the time, who may have been bribed to keep it quiet, who knows. But it may also have been prompted by, the social media statements he had been making about time will tell and what will come to light. And, people could have watched that and said, yeah, time will tell. And we have this video, so we'll release it now.
Doesn't this also go to his credibility? So I'm thinking about it. If he were to ever have to test, not have to, whether he decided to take the stand in any the lawsuits that he's facing, or he's called, or a criminal trial he wants to take the stand. He didn't just say, when all these allegations come out, I'll allow my legal team to respond, or I look forward to my day in court. He said these are all lies. He can't, a jury would look at that and say, you weren't telling the truth, because you say everything's a lie and then you're admitting this. Doesn't this really, really hurt his credibility in any future legal case?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to mesh those two statements together. They just don't kind of go together.
So it makes you think that maybe he wasn't listening to legal counsel, or he got bad legal advice, because again, what would you have recommended him to do at this point? Not say anything?
I mean, if I were advising him, I probably would not have told him to make that kind of flat denial in the beginning. Something more akin to what you suggested, which is, I'm looking forward to addressing these matters in court and, letting the legal system play out and that kind of thing. It could be that his lawyers didn't know kind of what existed and what was out there. And I think with a celebrity, you're not just not just taking advice from legal counsel, you're taking advice from PR people, you're kind of juggling a lot of things. And so sometimes you're making statements that may not be in your best legal interest, but maybe in your interest for other reasons.
But would there have been any adequate response from his legal team? I struggled. I tell you, Nadia, I could not think after that video came out what the response could be or should be. I interviewed a lawyer who said, Diddy should come out and say, admit this, and say, very similar to what he did. What if Diddy said, hey, I want to respond to this, what would your response have been? And so, yeah, let's assume everything, all the statements that were put out in the past few months still are there. This video comes out. What would you advise him to say or do, or not say or do?
Yeah, look, I think the only option if you want to make a statement is to do what he said, to apologize. And maybe that doesn't put him in the worst position, because it's clear from the video. It's not a grainy video. It's clear it's him. And, I guess these days you could say AI had made this or something like that, but that would be a kind of silly argument. So he didn't have any good options. But I think what I would have advised him from the beginning is to not be talking on social media, even in these cryptic statements about, suggesting that time will tell, prove his innocence and so forth. I would advise most clients when they're facing criminal investigation to essentially stay quiet and let the legal system play out.
And we've seen some response. So on X, there's a hashtag that people are using called hashtag no Diddy, meaning they're not accepting this responsibility. They're not accepting this apology. 50 Cent, who's had a beef with P. Diddy for a while, posted on X, this is not going to work. Who is advising him right now? SMH, bad move, meaning shaking my head. And then Meredith Firetog, who represents Cassandra Ventura and other women who have sued Sean Combs, said the apology, quote, was more about himself than the many people he has hurt. When Cassie and multiple other women came forward, he denied everything and suggested that his victims were looking for a payday, that he was only compelled to apologize once his repeated denials were proven false, shows his pathetic desperation, and no one will be swayed by his disingenuous words. How does this affect his lawsuits, the lawsuits that are against him? Does this incentivize him to try to settle them as soon as possible, knowing, I have to imagine one of the reasons he wanted to settle the Cassandra Ventura lawsuit was so this wouldn't come out. And as I mentioned, I think it gives strength to the other lawsuits, the allegations. Does this affect them? Does this in a way make him want to try to settle them sooner rather than later?
Potentially, but I think now that he knows he's under criminal investigation, my guess is he's going to kind of try to drag out the civil stuff to see what happens if there's any criminal case that's brought. And if there is a criminal case that's brought, it may well stay any civil proceedings while that's ongoing. So I don't know that it's going to affect the civil cases right now. Certainly for plaintiffs, evidence like this to show a pattern is certainly strong and compelling evidence that I'm sure they would want to use in any eventual case.
Does this give you any insight into where we are with the federal investigation and whether any potential criminal charges are going to be filed or any arrests are going to happen sooner rather than later?
I don't think it tells us anything about the timing, but it certainly suggests that prosecutors are, I'm sure, aware of this video even before it was released, and that they may well have other compelling video like that. And this is the type of thing that you don't, frankly, normally have in these types of cases, video of abuse, which normally occurs behind closed doors when no one else is around. And so that type of evidence can certainly strengthen the government's case, and can also maybe make them hasten it a little bit, because obviously this is in the public now, and there's going to be some fervor for consequences here.
And to be clear, he hasn't been charged with anything. He hasn't been found liable with anything with respect to this. These are allegations at this point. I mean, the video is very clear, in my opinion, but and it's also possible that you could see other women, other accusers come forward after this video came forward. They may feel they may feel comfortable to come forward with their own accounts if there are other accusers. I do want to ask you a question here about the LA County Attorney's Office, because they came out after that video circulated of in 2016, the hotel video. And their statement was, "We are aware of the video that has been circulating online allegedly depicting Sean Combs assaulting a young woman in Los Angeles. We find the images extremely disturbing and difficult to watch. If the conduct depicted occurred in 2016, unfortunately, we would be unable to charge, as the conduct would have occurred beyond the timeline where a crime of assault can be prosecuted." Let's first start off with the idea, if the LA County Attorney's Office didn't put out that statement acknowledging that their hands are tied and they can't charge Diddy because this is past the statute of limitations, you think Diddy would have put out that statement admitting that he did it?
Look, that certainly may have made him feel comfortable making the statement. I imagine he has lawyers that would have told him that the statute of limitations has run on that, even if the DA hadn't come out with that statement.
And before we go, a lot of people are frustrated. A lot of people are frustrated because they say, you have this tape. Now you have Diddy essentially admitting to what he did. How can you not charge him for assault? I understand statute of limitations, but if you can explain to our viewers and listeners why we have the statute of limitations on different crimes, and is there any way in LA that could be told, that could be paused or extended, where he actually could be criminally charged for that video? So A, is there any possibility he could be criminally charged? And B, explain to our viewers and listeners why it is important we have the statute of limitations, even though I can understand it's incredibly frustrating because people would want to see justice for Cassandra Ventura.
Yeah, so I'm not a California attorney, so I'm not sure about the rules about tolling in California. I think it's highly unlikely that there would be a way to charge that in California as an assault. But as we discussed earlier, this could well be powerful evidence used in a federal sex trafficking case or RICO case. So it's not like it's suddenly irrelevant now to any criminal charges. There is a way for this evidence to be used, and I imagine that prosecutors and agents are looking at it in that context. As far as statute of limitations, the general idea is that after a certain amount of time, people should be able to move on with their lives, and also evidence is generally, maybe less strong, memories fade and so forth. But there is a debate in this country about statutes of limitations for certain types of crimes and whether those should be extended. In many states, there have been things like the Adult Survivors Act and Child Victim Survivors Act that have been passed that allow people to bring civil cases for abuse that occurred decades ago. And so there's a real debate surrounding statutes of limitations. And it's not, super clear cut that a 1 year or a 3 year statute of limitations is appropriate in these types of cases.
One more question for you before I let you go. I want to make sure we're clear about this. Since we don't know where the tape came from, is there any way it was leaked in some way through the federal raids? Have you ever seen that before? Or is that once they obtain evidence, the feds in a search, That's held under lock and key. Do you imagine there was some sort of leak due to those raids? Assuming, by the way, they took this
Yeah.
video from maybe his properties.
I think if the leak came from the federal government, that would be highly problematic and very unusual. That is,
Well,
you know,
and by the way, I don't mean intentional necessarily. I mean something slipped through the cracks, because again, if he purchased the video, that's the allegation. It would have been at one of his properties and maybe they got it.
yes, I mean, that's theoretically possible, but generally speaking, the federal agents and government is usually very good at keeping, particularly in high profile cases, evidence, where it should be and not leaked. And it would be concerning if that had happened, even unintentionally, that would be concerning. I will say, usually, you can imagine situations where perhaps people that were bribed may have kept a copy of something as well, so that it could be coming from that end, but it's hard to say at this point.
Nadia Shihata, thank you so much for coming on this Sunday to break this down as it was happening. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.